So what do you think about exploring this idea of colors today as a thing to add to your repertoire?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I discovered something, I think it was last night or the night before, when I was going through that tritone exercise that you had given me, where you take, like C major, then you do the tritone, and then you drop it to F, and you do that descending line.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if you can see the video clearly or not.
Yep.
That good? One thing that was interesting that I noticed was, let me see if I can remember how to do it, because you'd have if you keep holding on the triad from the tritone, you end up getting like for example, F, and you keep, and then I drop down to this, and I just keep this hand the same. It's a really clear, bright sound, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I mean, it works with every one of those steps down.
Yeah, that's because it's a major seventh chord that you're resolving to. So just to make sure I know, I hear exactly what you're saying. You're saying, so you have your F here, F dominant 7, and then you're going to B flat, but you're keeping the which notes were you specifically keeping in the right hand? The actual F triad, that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're doing there is it's a happenstance that it sounds that way, because you are now playing the 9 of B flat in your thumb, the 5 of B flat, and the 7 of B flat, which are all, you're correct that it's a bright chord, because those are all bright upper extensions of B flat major. So this.
It was just something I noticed.
Yeah, and it's, you can use that, and that actually that's a good transition into our conversation about colors, because this F major triad over B flat is a specific color. It's a bright color, and it's because it happens to include the 9, the 1, and the major 7. So you could play a B flat down here, and then play that, and lay on that. It doesn't need to resolve anywhere. But if you add the 3 of B flat, it'll sound more grounded, and you can still keep that triad there. Does that make sense? You can keep the F triad, but add the D, which is the 3. And do all sorts of stuff with that, and that's a specific color that it can be very beautiful. And you can use that when you're going from F to B flat, or you could just use it. You can use it in any context. You can be playing like B flat minor, which is a dark chord, and then if you want to make that a bright chord, then go to that upper. I call it a superimposition. You're superimposing an F major triad over B flat. So then go to that superimposition. So you could play F minor 7. We talked about minor 7 chords and all that, yeah? And you're familiar with all that? Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
So B flat minor 7. I think did I say F? I meant B flat minor 7. Then you can do the F major over B flat, which then becomes a B flat major 9 chord. Does that make sense?
Yeah, hang on one second. I'm trying to close something. I can see if there's anything I can shut down on my end to make you a little clearer.
Sorry.
I don't think there is.
Okay. Ethan, let's look into installing a faster connection for the studio. Yeah, ask Eric what the connection plan is, and see if maybe we just contribute some money to up it to a faster connection. All right, so are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's just really stuttery.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just glad you're recording all this because I'm gonna have to go back and review it.
Cool.
But I follow along. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so like if I'm doing, let's just say, all right. So now let's talk more about colors and what superimpositions can lead to what colors, and let's just talk about it from in C. Okay. So take away the context we're just working with. Now we're gonna go to the most simple, C major. Basic chord, right? If I were to want that same color, the major 9 and the major 7 over C, can you tell me what chord I would superimpose?
What do you mean the major 9 and the major 7?
So when we were in B flat just now, and you played an F major,
okay.
You had the major 9 down here and the major 7 up here, because the 5 of an F major is the same as the 9 of a B flat major. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so wouldn't it be B and D for C?
For C, it would be, yeah, B and D, but we're superimposing a specific chord, which includes B and D. Which chord is that?
Would just be G major.
Yes, exactly, G major. So if you want that bright tone over C major, you can play a G major triad, and you hear that in different compositions. Like, you know, Vince Guaraldi, I think he has one of the Charlie Brown tunes that goes like. You heard that? You know that song? Have you heard that before?
I think so.
It's like one of the Charlie Brown Christmas things, I think.
Yeah.
Or wait, maybe it's. I might be totally wrong. It might be one of the Four Seasons things by that other guy. Oh man, I'm gonna be ripped apart when I post this video up. People will know. So that's a specific color that's used compositionally in a lot of different contexts. So right now I want you to mess with it for a second. So pick a few different keys and do that same thing. Do that color, that one color, over a few different keys.
To think about it a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. This is where the practice will come in. Eventually you'll ingrain it into your subconscious, but for now it's going to be completely calculated. While you're figuring that out, I'm going to write this down in our notes.
Like 6 minutes of footage.
That's all we need. That's not. There you go. Yeah, what you did a second ago was another superimposition, which we're going to talk about, but that wasn't the one that we're doing right now.
Okay. So, I know that there has to be some sort of weird relationship between the tritone that resolves to C and what we're doing here, right? Because the tritone of G,
Mm-hmm.
is that what makes that work?
No, it has nothing to do with it.
All right. Just so happens that it's
Exactly. There are lots of happenstances that we're going to be discovering as we go through all of this, and it's used in compositions throughout history, because the simple fact that this keyboard is the way it is a combination of the physics of how our ear works and these accidents of history. Like the way that this scale is, it's not actually it doesn't align directly with the physics of our ear. Like a fifth is not actually a fifth. A perfect fifth on the piano, because it's equally tempered so that you can play chromatically, this is slightly, I think it's slightly sharp from what an actual fifth is. It's either slightly sharp or slightly flat. But an actual fifth is determined by the overtone series. When you chop an octave, when you find the I can't remember the math of it, but it's like a third. You take the wave form and you cut it into thirds. I think that's what a fifth is. Somebody will obviously correct me in this YouTube video. That's so a lot of what we talk about, like, things will happen to align, and some of them will align very closely and some will be further distant, and this one happens to align very closely. So playing a G major over a C is a beautiful tone that has the 9 and the major 7 of C, but it doesn't have anything to do with the resolution of C, of G to C.
Okay.
I mean, with one caveat, there's one actual reasoning to, there's one point of reasoning to put with all of this. Resolving from G to C it's the closest step away in the tension resolution spectrum, right? You have G, which is right next to C. If you have D, that's 2 steps away, right? So D dominant to G, G dominant to C, right? Does that make sense? So you're going 2 steps now. D is a fifth away from G, which is a fifth away from C. Now the colors get brighter in that direction the further that you go. Let me explain this a little more. This is a very bland tone, right? Just this triad.
Yeah.
Now, if I superimpose G, it's a little bit richer and brighter of a tone.
Yeah.
If I superimpose the chord 1/5 above that, it's an even brighter tone. Now, can you tell me why that is?
I don't understand why that would be, actually.
I'll explain. Because
there's a lot of tension in it for me, at least.
Yeah,
to my ear.
totally. There's tension because you have the F sharp note in there, which is the 3 of G of D, which exactly, it's a tritone away from C. It's that. However, it's bright. If you take in the emotional content of these chords, this is brighter than this, right? So there's this, and then it's a little bit brighter here.
Yeah.
But if you go here, that's even brighter. And that's because as you go in that direction on the circle of fifths, you go a fifth up and a fifth up and a fifth up, you're sharping tones of the diatonic scale. So the first note that you sharp when you go to G, if you play a G major scale, what's the one note that is sharped in comparison to the C major scale?
For the G major? The F.
Yeah, exactly. It's the F sharp. It's not included in the triad of G major, but it's implied. And you're still using these 2 tones from the diatonic scale of C, from C major. These 2 tones exist within the C major scale. This note does not exist within the C major scale, but these 2 do. And when you play an F major triad, you are using these 2 notes which are in the C major scale but not C chord tones. Does that make sense, or does that need more explanation?
I think I understand when you say chord tones, because that's sort of what we just played, kind of.
Chord tones are 1, 3, and 5. So here's 1, 3, and 5 of C. Upper extensions are 7 and 9.
So upper extensions are not technically chord tones of any given key?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
I mean, you could. It becomes a semantics thing at that point, but yes, that's how I refer to them.
Okay. Okay.
So you could think of this. So you're stacking C and then G, right? Now you can think of this as a C major 9 when you look at that, or you can think of it as a G over C. The most basic way to think of it is a C major 9 chord, but that's very limited in the conversation that we're beginning in this lesson, because we are going to take this G and we're going to make it a lot of different chords that then give you different colors. So let me explain that a little more thoroughly. Thinking of this as a C major 9, you can play all this pretty stuff. But if you want to transform it, there's a lot of thought process to go through to transform it. If you want to make it darker, you have to think of like, how do I make it darker? What notes would make it darker? Maybe I flat the 7. And then I can think of the C major scale with the flat 7 and the 9. And then maybe I want to flat the 3, maybe I want to flat the 6. All of those things can happen, but it's a lot of thought process to go through. The way that I like to think of it, and the way that a lot of great musicians think of it, including like Herbie Hancock, thinks of it this way more often than not, is superimpositions. So this is, if you think of this as a G over C, then you can change it to an E flat over C if you want to make it dark. And if you want to make it even darker, and I'll explain why and how to go here, but if you want to make it even darker, then make it a D flat. And then if you want to resolve it, make it a bright one like G again. And if you want to make it even brighter, then you go to D. Or even brighter to the point of dissonance, make it an A. And all that I'm doing here is taking my root, which is C, and then taking my triad in my right hand, and I'm moving it around the circle of fifths in one direction or another. All that requires you to do to figure out how to navigate that is look at your note and look at a fifth away. So we're going to G first. That's your bright, you're slightly brighter in that direction, right? Pretty bright. Go one more in that direction. And what do you get? One more fifth up in that direction.
You get D.
Yeah. Now play that over a C. But now open up the left side of it a little bit. Play like a fifth down here, and then stacked fifths over here. So you have more of an open sound. You have more. You're playing less chord tones. You're playing 1, 5, and 9. 9, which is not a chord tone. So you're leaving out the 3. You have more space to do superimpositions that will not be too dissonant. And now play a D. Oh. So what was that?
Just it's bear with me for a second, because like I literally do not know the notes on the keyboard. I'm like, that's C, and then I literally have to
Yeah,
come up
it's
and
fine.
plug
It's
in
great.
the idiot when
But
I
that
do
was a
it.
beautiful sound that you created, and I want to explore what that was and how you got there, because you're doing it by accident, but when you know what sound it's
It
going to
was a
make, you'll be able to...
G sharp, so it kind of, well,
Yeah. Now, but you just got 2 steps beyond where we were on the circle of fifths in that direction. And let me explain to you what that is that you just played. So then you can reference it and know exactly what you're doing. So you have C, you have G, you have D, then what's 1/5 up from there?
A.
Yeah. So you have A, what's 1/5 up from there?
E.
There you go. And you were playing the 3 of E,
Yeah.
which can either be very dissonant, or you can take away the dissonance by the reason that there's dissonance there is because this note is a flat 9 away from the 5 of the chord, and I'm playing the 5 down here. So you have that sound, which is one of the most dissonant sounds that you have. Now if you take away the 5th and just play the 1, it can be different. It sounds very different. So play an E major chord over just the 1. And it's a very specific sound. This is a sound that you can use compositionally, because you're getting brighter, and now so we're sort of heading towards an abyss here, right? We started very like solidly grounded in harmony. Now we're going in superimpositions away from our original harmony, and we're pretty far. And we're almost at the tipping point where it gets to the exact opposite end of the circle of fifths, where if you go the other direction, you'll end up in the same space. So when I say it goes brighter in this direction and it goes darker in this direction, it's a relative term, because you end up in the same place at the other side, in complete dissonance. So in this direction, going brighter on the circle of fifths, we've now hit E. If you go another one, you've hit B. And now you're playing C major over B major, which if you play it right next to each other, it's about as dissonant as you can get. There's only one more level of dissonance that you can go. Whereas if you go one more fifth away to F sharp, which is the exact other side of the circle of fifths, that's the most dissonant that you can get, because you have 3 tritones on top of each other.
Yeah, actually, a sound that I really, really like is this. Which isn't that far off.
Well, okay.
There's G sharp too.
So, okay, cool. Remember that, because I'm going to circle back to that specific chord and tell you why that works and how to use that in various contexts.
Okay.
First I want to cover both directions of the circle of fifths and where they lead to, and then how to utilize each of those elements of it.
Okay.
And this is going to be an important anchor point, because it's a very common chord used in jazz. It's the sharp 9, sharp 5. Like dominant 7, sharp 9, sharp 5 chord. But you can get there using what we're talking about right now, which is superimpositions.
Okay.
Let me just write a little note to myself to come back to that.
Sure.
Okay. So you have this chord, which is C major triad, and F sharp major triad. Just play that for me, right on top of each other. There you go. Yeah. Now, that's used historically in a lot of different ways. Stravinsky wrote an entire opera based on an evil puppet where that was the theme chord, basically. That was like the basis of the whole of his theme. His name is Petrushka, and this was the Petrushka chord. It went down in history because this is what the whole opera was based on, was this dissonant interval, like. It's very dissonant, but it can be used musically also in its dissonance. Yeah.
There's something. It does like within it. There's some weird like leading sounds like it wants to go places to me.
Yeah, it does. Well, it also is indicative of the diminished scale, which is a scale that you hear historically in jazz music from its beginnings, because because of the nature of how that chord exists, which is 3 tritones stacked on top of each other. It has virtually every possibility of resolution built into the chord. Like, pick any one of those tritones and you can resolve it. This one can resolve here. This can resolve here. Right? The next tritone that's made can resolve either of those directions. The next tritone can resolve in either of those directions. So if you have this chord that you're playing, you can pick any one of those chords as the root and resolve in any direction from that root. So then that could resolve, because we look at the wait, actually let me pick a better example. No, that's a good example. So that's your root, and we're gonna pick the tritones of these two notes. This tritone that's made by the E and the B flat, and we're gonna resolve it in one direction or another. There are various directions you can resolve, but let's say we're gonna resolve out. So this becomes this, and this becomes this. So you've just resolved from this chord over an F sharp to a B major, and it works. And you can, if you want it to be less dissonant, you can take out some of the other aspects of the tritone, like include this tritone and include this tritone, so it's just so this tritone resolving there, and this tritone is resolving there. This one is based on the upside down harmony that we went through in the last lesson, or in the first lesson I think we did, because there's a skip there. So it's as though the scale was flipped on its head and you were resolving from a minor to a major. I'm not going to go into the whole thing because that's going to take a really long time to explain. But just know that that skip means it's going a little bit further away from its natural progression, but it's still natural. And this is the most natural that you can get as far as a tritone resolution, because it's a half step and a half step. So you have these 2 tritones resolving each to their own location. And if you do it over an F sharp root, this becomes the flat 7 of F sharp, this becomes the 3 of F sharp, this becomes the 5, and this becomes the flat 9. And then this becomes the 1 and the 5 and the 3 and the 1 of B. Bam. That's a lot of content to absorb just now, and I'm sure I lost you at some point in there. But if you watch this video a few times, I think it will sink in.
Yeah, that's usually what I have to do.
Cool.
I mean, like, I just sort of, it's like, whenever we have a lesson, it's like drinking from a fire hose, and I just sort of go, okay, I just have to go back to this point in the lesson, and I'll just go back. But what ends up happening is I'll go back and I'll review something, and then I'll find something else that you had mentioned for me to work on. And then while I'm working on it, I discover other little things that you didn't go into. And then I'm like, how far down do I want to follow this? Because he's going to tell me I should have been practicing something else.
Totally. Well, you can also, if you find yourself distracted by something interesting, just call me and I'll explain that other interesting thing to you.
I actually, funny you mentioned that. I almost texted you at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I think in the second lesson we talked about tritone substitutions, and I didn't get it at all at the time. And then I realized that the 3 and the 7 of like one tritone becomes the 7 and a 3 of another. Yeah. And it functions the same way. And
exactly.
I was like, what the fuck? Like, how did you, like, you can do this? Like, that. And it was like, it was one of those things that was right in front of my face the whole time. And it was like so exciting. And my wife came, or it wasn't 3 in the morning, it was in the evening. And she came home and I'm like, oh my God, this thing, it does this. And she was like, okay, like, what do you want for dinner?
Welcome to my world. That's like, man, I'm getting excited about that sort of thing all the time. And the deeper you go, the more connections you find with every facet of what you're doing on the keyboard, until it all just becomes one big synchronicity of information, which is like what we're all trying to get to in our studies of the piano.
Well, what I found was interesting is I was trying to think of different ways, because one of the things I've been practicing was going from using the tritone and resolving to a minor. So you have stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that I found, I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it's wide enough.
I can see it.
I mean, I'm just playing C in the 5th, another C. And then down here, can you see it? There's a weird cyclical motion that happens when you do this. And you do that kind of F minor over, I guess, E sharp major. Or no, C minor over E sharp major. Is that right? No, D sharp. So you have this, it starts there, then it goes to the minor that you would resolve to. And the thing that was interesting about it was just seeing that was this weird motion from the G to F sharp to F to G. As you moved up in half-step increments in the left hand. So I was like, what the fuck?
Like that? You're talking about? Like, you put this in my head better. I don't quite get what you're doing, and I think it relates to what we're doing.
Okay, so, alright.
And it's hard for me to see exactly what your hands are doing because the screen is flipped.
Yeah.
It's like a mirror image.
So in my right hand,
Uh-huh.
I'm just playing the 1, the 5, the 1.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
In my left hand, I'm starting out playing the 5 and the 3. So when you go up a half step, you get with the 5 and the 3 to one of the minors.
Yeah.
And then in the right hand, you just play this note in the right hand. So the right hand's just doing this, but the left hand is doing this. So that works in all the keys to do that motion to get to a minor sound from, that. But if you go up another half step and you bring that F in the right hand to F sharp, and then you move up another half step, you get the D.
Keep the C on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's been a thing where I can take that it's a way to get to, it's a different way to get to a tritone that lets me resolve it in a different direction. But I just noticed that when you do that, because you're just doing a C major there, you're just spreading it out.
Yep.
And then doing that little half step to get to the minor, which is, is that F minor?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you get an F minor, and it brings you to that tritone really easily.
Okay.
And then I can resolve it in different ways.
Yeah, so
and I did that with a bunch of different keys. Is like, okay, because what I would find is I would what my wife, I would just ask her like, hey, just find a melody for me. Just give me something I can play with my right hand.
Okay.
And then I'll take it and make it minor and make it major, and then try to play chords over it in the left hand to see if I can do the changes that you and I have been going over.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that I discovered. I was like, okay, you can do this everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then it created another little, it opened up another door for me to go from one key to another.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I get to the new place, you play the melody again, and new major or minor, and just tweak it. So it's sort of, I think it has to do with what you're talking about today with like the circle of fists and stuff. I don't have it all.
Yeah,
it's a cool sound.
It sort of has to do with that and sort of doesn't. So what you found is one microcosm of the interest that can come from combining melody and voice leading and harmony.
Mm-hmm.
It's one piece of vocabulary that you like stumbled upon that you like, which is exactly what you should be doing. Because then you find these things that you use in your own compositions, and you can use it in a million different ways in a million different directions. The basis of understanding what you did there is not that much more than understanding that you're playing a 1 chord over the 5. Does that make sense when I say that? And then you're going to the minor 4 chord over the 3 of the minor 4 chord, and you're voice leading it in the best way possible. If you look at Bach chorales, he does this a million times in a million different ways. And then if you want to go from here to another chord, you voice lead it, and what you happened to find was that you can go to the dominant 2 by just moving these all up a half step. And now you're on the dominant 2 of that chord, of C.
Yeah.
And
I think I need to try and understand, and it's come up before when I've watched your videos about what is a jazz progression, what is a pop rock progression, like the 2-5-1 in jazz. Like I don't quite understand what like a 2 chord is or a 5 chord or a 1. Like I don't know what that is.
Let me explain that real quick.
I don't know how it works.
Because that's easy, and we've already gone over it basically, but I haven't put it into those terms. 2-5-1. So what? Let me do it in questions. What's a 5-1?
A 5-1, would it be just like
Yep.
G to C?
Exactly. Play, but if you're in the C major scale,
Mm-hmm.
then of what quality do you play the 5?
Major.
It's
right?
major, but there's one other note, if one upper extension, which is that. So that's the 5. And what's this note to the 5 chord?
7th.
Exactly. It's and what type of 7th?
What do you mean? What type?
Is it
A
major
minor
or is it
seventh.
a minor? Yeah, it's a minor 7th, which we call the dominant. And you have your tritone here that's naturally built in, and that resolves where?
To your C.
Exactly. So all that is 5 chord, 5-1, right? That's pretty simple. So now let's just look at this from a universal perspective. You have your C. You go one step away in this direction, and you have your G, right? And we're staying diatonic. So it's a G dominant 7. If you go one more step away in fifths in that direction, where are you?
Good D.
Exactly. And now if you're in a C major diatonic scale, what is the quality of the D chord that you'll be playing?
Minor.
Yes. And then if you add the 7th onto it, if you add the 7th onto that, then where does that lie?
It's the major 7th, right?
No, it's a minor 7th. Because we're looking in D. So D, if it were a major 7th, it would be here. Because the D major scale is... But we're playing 1, minor 3, 5, minor 7 of D. Because we're looking at all of this from the lens of the C major diatonic scale. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I know it's a lot.
Well, it's stuff that I know I've heard a million times, and I'm sure I understand it. It's just the names.
Well, let me give you an easier way to look at it. A C major scale is all the white keys. If you change any one of those to a black key, you're out of the C major scale. C major scale happens to be all the white keys on the keyboard. So when you play any chord over a C major scale, you're only using the white keys. So if you play a D chord, you're using all the white keys to play a D 7th chord. But then if you look at it from the perspective of D, this is a minor triad, right?
Yeah.
And this is a minor 7. This would be a major 7. This is a minor 7. Because, do you know the D major scale? Yeah. So that is a C sharp, right?
Yeah.
To make it to make it in the major diatonic C scale, where does that have to be?
Has to be in C.
Exactly. So now, what is that note in relation to D?
Basically a dominant 7.
Exactly. It's a minor. Well, it's a minor 7.
When you make it a minor, it has the same as like a C. I was in C doing this, and I was like, that's why that sounds so familiar. Instead of it being, because the tension's gone.
Yep, exactly. Well, the tritone is gone. That's why a dominant 7th is such an unstable chord, because there's a tritone smack dab in the middle of it that needs to resolve. So, but the D minor chord is there's not a lot of tension there. A minor 7. There are no tritones in those chord tones. It's stacked fifths. There's a 5th here and a 5th here. So, let's take a step back now. How did we get there to the D?
What do you mean? Like, 'cause
From the C, how did we get there?
it's 2, it's a 5th and then a 5th.
Yep. Now, how do you resolve... What's the closest resolution from one chord to another chord?
The closest resolution?
Yeah. Like, G dominant 7 resolves to what?
C.
Yes. Now, what if you went up a 5th and you played D dominant 7? Where does that resolve to?
A.
Nope.
G.
Yes.
So why? Well, it can resolve in either way, right?
It can resolve in a lot of different directions, but the most direct resolution is the 5 to the 1. That's the most traditional, the most direct resolution. Other ones are divergences that you can use compositionally, but eventually, at least in classical composition, you would always eventually end up from the 5 to the 1.
Okay.
And you do in jazz as well. in general in traditional jazz. I mean, it doesn't, not everything always resolves at all, but that's why you have a 2-5-1, because the 2 is actually the 5 of the 5 chord. The D goes down to G, and the G goes down to C.
Okay.
So a 2-5-1 is just 5 to the 1 and then 5 to the 1 again. You're going 2 directions displaced away from your home key. But if you keep it in the major, if you keep it diatonic, this is a minor. The D is a minor. And then the G is a major and the C is a major. And if you add the 7th, it's a D dominant 7th chord to a a D minor 7th chord to a G dominant 7th chord to a C major 7th chord. And if you voice lead it, it becomes just a traditional 2-5-1.
Okay.
I know it's a lot.
Well, I mean, my first thought is like that works to just get back to C, but I'm trying to think about how. You know what? I'll save it for later because I think you're going to get there anyways. So just go.
Ask me. I might be able to go more directly to what your question is.
One of the things that I wonder about is when you have somebody playing solo piano, not taking a solo in a trio, because that's not my thing.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about somebody who's just playing solo and they start going off in a direction, is there a progression that's underneath that, or is it? And are they coming up with the progression as they go along, or is it pre-thought out? Like if you start taking a really long solo on a song you're playing solo, is it a progression that's an extension of the 2-5-1, or does it just go in different places? Like where is the structure there? Because I find when I play, there is a structure, but I don't know what it is. I don't. Mm-hmm. It might be 2-5-1, but because I don't know the numbers of the chords. It could be something totally different.
So what you're speaking to is the fact that the 2-5-1 is a reflection of the nature of harmony. And the basis of harmony is the 5 to the 1 chord. So everything that you play, that you hear, if you're playing it tonally, which there's a whole school of atonal music that has nothing to do with traditional harmony, but everything that you would reference, until we go there, has to do with the resolution of the 5 chord to the 1 chord. The 2-5-1 is simply an extension of the resolution of the 5 to the 1 chord.
Okay.
The 6-2-5-1, which is a step beyond that, is again another extension of that, because the 6 is a fifth above the 2, which is A minor. The 2 is a fifth above the 5, and the 5 is a fifth above the 1. It's all going in fifths back to the home bass. And anything that you play will be a combination of your ear understanding that the 5 leads to the 1 and the tritones around it that we're picking apart and that we're intellectualizing now, but you hear intuitively. It's a combination of that and motivic development, which is taking the relativity between any given notes and connecting the dots, which your brain does. You play this note and this note and this note, and then you play this note and this note and this note, and your brain understands that this is exactly a mirror image of this down the keyboard at a certain degree. Your brain hears all that intuitively. So you create compositions that then have these connections of if you're playing something that's even, if I play that up there and then I play this down there, your brain connects the two, and then you play this and your brain connects the two. But then your brain is also connecting where the harmony is going with the combination of all of those notes, which it was, I could lead through all these various chords by using that motivic development from we're starting on the minor 1, right? And the minor is C minor, and I'm playing the 3 to the 2 of C minor, and then the 5 to the 6 of C minor, and then doing other like leading. I could do a leading tone, like a chromatic leading passage back to that same note an octave up. Or I could just start the chromatic passage and then start it and then go in a different direction that then goes to the 2 with some upper extensions that then goes to the 5 with some upper extensions and then resolves to the 1. But it's a culmination of everything that you know intellectually about the way that these keys lead into each other, and general motivic development, which you can do intuitively just by looking at the space between notes and the relation to each other on the keyboard. It's a ton of information. I know it's like way overwhelming, but that's why people practice for like hours a day, every day, and then after years of practice, you have all of this information like put it into chunks that's then in your intuition, and if you need to explain it, you can sometimes explain it, but it comes out intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
The talk about...
Yeah, I think it just...
Sorry, go on.
It reminds me of the first lesson that we had where you were like, okay, you can play a bunch of shit, you don't know what any of it means, so let's talk about 2 seconds of what you just played since you don't understand any of it.
Yeah.
And I sometimes feel like that, like when you were just playing something, I don't remember what it was that you were playing. I think you got to there or something, and I'm like, all right, are you thinking about it in terms of these numbers or whatnot, or you just have you internalized that when you go in this direction, you end up getting a darker sound, or you get that dissonant kind of sound, or
Yeah, there are layers of knowledge of that chord. Yeah. One is that it's that it's darker than my original. Well, maybe it may or may not be darker. One is that it's one direction down on the circle of fifths, because it's an F dominant, right? If I'm in C minor, I know that this is downwards from the circle of fifths. So, because C goes down to F if you're looking at fifths. Another is that there's this point of tension here that could resolve in this direction if I want to, or could resolve in this direction if I want to. I see the options. It's like playing a game of chess. You see the options ahead of you, and you see a million different options. And then the other is the fact that in my original motif, I played this to this, and if I want to play that same thing down here, I could go here to here, but then that would be the 6 of F dominant, and maybe that becomes then the 3 of B flat. It's like a bunch of different options. So the knowledge of all these things is there, but the knowledge only happens by taking a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of this and practicing it over and over and over again. So like, we will go into motivic development, and one thing I'm going to make you do is look at, for example, a minor second. And everything that you can do with that, which you can play a minor second anywhere on the keyboard. Right? You can, and it makes no sense. But you can play a minor second up here, and then pick an octave down, and do it in a reverse direction, and then you've created a connection to vocabulary.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting at, now that I think about it, is getting into what the lessons start off with colors, and seeing whether you want to get something that's brighter or darker, and then I guess once you push beyond that far enough, you start getting into weird stuff like tritone substitutions to get that weird, like, twisted dissonance and stuff.
Yeah, well, this is that weird twisted dissonance. We already got there. F sharp over C. F sharp is the tritone substitution of C, because it's a tritone away. C dominant, F dominant, to F major. You know? You can move from one chord to its tritone to resolve to the same spot with an elongated dissonance. C dominant is dissonance. F sharp dominant more dissonance if you're playing in the key of C, and then you can lead to F. Or you could just go from C dominant to F, but it gives you more interest and it gives you a longer tail if you go from C dominant to F sharp dominant to F. You know? But let me finish what I started in that realm, though, by going the other direction around the circle of fifths and showing you what that does. There's going to be a lot of information to process here. So, you understand how we got to F sharp, right? We kept going up on the circle of fifths, from C to G to D to A to E to B to F sharp, right?
Yeah.
If you go the other way, you can go C down a fifth to F, down a fifth to B flat, to E flat, to A flat, to C to D flat. I'm going to go up the octave, D flat, to G flat. G flat is the same chord as F sharp, and you're in the same spot, which is why I say it's semantics and it's emotional when you're talking about brighter and darker, because you end up in the same other universe, in the same alternate universe. First you're on C, and then you're on F sharp eventually as you get more dissonant in one direction or another. This is brighter, this is darker, but it's all actually just emotional in relative terms. So let's go darker. Okay? This is C. Now F over C is a darker sound. Now you put B flat over C, which is another fifth down. It's an even darker sound. Now you put E flat over C, which is another fifth down. It's even darker. And if you look at relative terms here, the 1 of E flat is the minor 3 of C. The 5 of E flat is the minor 7 of C, and the 3 of E flat is the 5 of C. So you have this sound that you've now created. You go one more darker. What does that sound? It's weird. Did I just do something on my piano? I just heard it. Whatever. I wonder if the speakers are on my piano. It's weird. I don't know what that was. Anyway, you go one darker than that, one down on the circle of fifths. So what's a fifth down from E flat?
G sharp.
Yeah, or A flat. We're talking in flats now.
Oh, okay.
That's even darker. Now you go one further down and you're on D flat. Darker, and you go one further down, and you're in the alternate universe of G flat or F sharp, which is the exact point of complete blurriness between bright and dark. So you're going brighter on one side, you're going darker on one side, but as you get closer to that other side, it gets more and more ambiguous until you're just completely atonal.
Yeah.
So then now that you know that, you can use all those colors. Like if I'm playing in C and I want to make it darker, bright C major, dark A flat major. I want to make it even darker, I'll go to D flat. side of the circle, then darker by going to D flat major, and then resolving to the C. Dark, bright, dark, neutral. Dark, A flat, bright, A, dark, A flat, C neutral. Or actually, no, this is kind of still bright because I'm actually doing G.
So, all right, because I know she just got home, so I don't know how much longer I have.
Yeah, we can go. We can go. I mean, it's been an hour or
But
so.
is just like I've asked you before, are there any kind of exercises or things that you would recommend that I do so I can drill this down? The thing where I was playing in time with when I was going down the descending line, that actually helped a lot. Do you have anything that you could recommend or show me really quick that I could practice to at least get some of what we talked about under my fingers?
Yeah, absolutely. There are two things I want you to do. One is listen to Herbie. Listen to the album Miles Smiles.
Okay.
There's a ton of Herbie Hancock's playing on this that he uses these sorts of concepts. It's way early in his career when he was with the Miles Quintet. I mean, he still does it. If you listen to Herbie's River album, he does it even more obviously, but it's kind of cooler in the Miles Smiles album. So listen to that, like, at least once a week, the whole album through. Just try to get it, because it'll sound pretty abstract at first. But then the actual exercise you can do is take a key, maybe do a different key every day, and you can do it in time or out of time. If you feel comfortable doing it in time, then do it in time with a metronome. But play through all of the colors, and improvise through them. You can, and there are two different ways to do it. One way is just having no limitations on your scale, like so you've got C major, and then go brighter. So, and then D. Just hear how it sounds, and play it, and then go brighter to A. Your left hand is going to be at least playing octaves, but sometimes fit in either the fifth or the 9 to give yourself open space on the top. So I'm playing A, and now play E. Mess around with that. And then B. Until you get to F sharp, and then stop. Then go in the other direction. Now it's F, and you'll do this a lot slower, by the way. B flat, E flat, and a cool thing to do is actually to try to keep the same top note as you're doing this, because then it creates melody throughout what you're doing. So like C, F, E flat, to E flat, to A flat, to D flat, to F sharp.
And you're really just sticking in major in the
All
in the
major.
right,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Thinking all major in the right. It's just major triads.
Not even messing with minor yet.
No, and the thing is, you don't really need to, because every major chord that you're doing here, because it's a superimposition, is the minor chord of another key.
Okay.
So all you have to do is put the two together of which is which, and you don't even really have to do it because eventually you're playing with colors intuitively. You're not even really thinking of it as an A flat.
I guess you can also say, like, here, play C and then just play notes. I want you to practice just playing notes while you press C. Because that's like, if I was like, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah, so I get what you're saying. There's limitations for me to...
Well, you have to impose limitations on yourself in order to understand what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking out loud to myself, like, no, minor and all these other things don't make any sense because that defeats the purpose of the exercise, because at that point I'm just playing all the notes. So,
yeah.
I was just thinking out loud.
I think that makes sense if I understand what you're saying. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it does. One other thing is, if you want to make yourself if you want to give yourself another limitation, which might help, keep it in one octave. So pick the 5 to the 5 of C, and now go through that exercise. So you're playing C, now you want to go brighter, so play G, and make melodies out of this. You can use the whole scale if you want. Now do D. Now do A. Now do E. Now do B. But stay within that octave range. And now F sharp. And then go the other direction within that same octave.
Would it be the same if I flipped the hands and I just did, like I just played C in the right hand and then went through and did?
Yeah, man, try that. That'll be really cool, actually. It's not the same because then your ear hears this as the root. So if you were like this, it sounds to your ear like you're switching keys because you're changing the root note. Up here, it doesn't. It sounds like colors. Down here, it sounds like key changes. But it's still cool and totally a concept you should mess with.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't want to get too far away from being able to move through things with my left hand, because I find that that's something I like doing a lot.
Well,
and
this is going to give you more ways to move with your left hand. We're doing this over one key, but that's just to learn the concept. When we get this down, you'll see how each of these create dissonant chord tones that then are tritones that move you to one key or another, and then when you're in another key, you can use superimpositions over that key as well. Yeah. So then it's not just like staying over a chord tone. That's just to learn it. Then you're going like. And those are all using superimpositions, but moving the keys around. That's what we're getting to. This is just the first step.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact,
Try to do that.
I'm going to write down.
Yep.
Exercises. Move in each direction with and without metronome, with and without limitation of 1 octave. Next steps. Move the color concept around different keys. Observe where tritones are created. Observe color patterns that make sense, are beautiful, and are musical through varying keys. That would be a good step.
Is there anybody that you can think of that's not modern that would be a good example of this? Like, should I go back and listen to a bunch of Ravel or something?
Oh yeah, man, Ravel killed this sort of stuff. In fact, Herbie Hancock draws a lot of his influence from Ravel. Debussy as well did a lot.
Yeah, I've been trying to listen to more of that, whether I'm in the car or it's probably weird. I go to the gym and I'll listen to the Well Tempered Clavier, which isn't exactly like
I do the same
lifting music.
I do
but
the
it
exact
really,
same thing. I do the exact same thing.
It centers me. Is there anybody else that you can think of that you, or any compositions? Because I mean, like it's a little difficult to get through like Bach's catalog, right?
Of course.
There's just so much.
Have you ever learned Clair de Lune?
Hmm?
Have you ever learned Clair de Lune?
On the piano? No, I love the Sweet Bergamask or whatever it's called, though.
Okay.
That whole thing is awesome. I love it.
I would learn Clair de Lune. That's a great one. And that uses, like, it actually uses everything that we've talked about in all these lessons. Reverse harmony, and tritone resolutions, colors, like that's one that you could do if you feel like you need a break from trying to get the fugue, the Bach fugue. Then maybe pick that up. And I mean, I'm sure there are also a million videos that teach it online.
Well, what I was thinking of doing with Bach is the fugues they're a lot more difficult than I thought, and it's mainly because it's the fingering.
Yeah.
And how you need to be set up in anticipation of the next move.
Yep.
Because it's funny when I listen to like the fugue in C major, I'm like, that doesn't sound hard at all, and then I'm like, wait, shit, like that's like I did it totally wrong. It's very deceptive.
No, I know, it's wild.
I think some of the preludes are a little easier, and I was thinking about just going through and doing some of the preludes, and then maybe coming back once I had a better feel for them.
That's
Do you
cool.
think that's worth it at all?
Yeah, if you feel like the fugue is too much to tackle, then yeah, grab some of the preludes for now, and then as you learn more of it, the vocabulary